Hi, I'm John Matthews, veteran law enforcement officer, winery owner, and your host for the podcast version of True Crime in Wine. Now, I'm pleased that you joined us for this unique podcast where we feature the fascinating world of serial killers while enjoying award winning wine. So, why serial killers and wine? Well, the answer is simple. I'm the only winemaker in the world that's captured a serial killer. And no, I didn't use wine. But this is real true crime and real wine. And each episode, myself and Brandy Diamond, the popular podcast host of Texas Wine and True Crime, which you can hear on Spotify and all your favorite podcast platforms, she joins me, and together we take you on a profiling journey to some of the most interesting and intriguing serial killer cases from all around the world, well, enjoying our favorite wines. Now, I've got my favorite Casaro wine today. It's our Dolcetto, but we'll talk about that a little later. So pour yourself a glass of Killer Cabernet or Murderous Merlot and join us for the podcast version of True Crime and Wine. And as always, make sure you share the show with your friends and other true crime lovers. Salud. In this episode, we're going to take you on a journey into the life and crimes of Robert Brashers. Now, he's a serial killer best known not for his serial crimes, but for one night in Austin, Texas, where he murdered four teenagers in what is now commonly referred to as the yogurt shop murders. I want to welcome in my co-host, Brandy Diamond. And Brandy, this is a very different serial killer case because this killer is really better known as a spree killer for the four young girls he murdered in an Austin yogurt shop.
Yeah, John, you and I are from Texas. We know about this case in Austin. It never left the community. I'll say that. They wanted this person caught who took four innocent lives. And we're going to just learn so much about him. But yes, it's a interesting, hard case. I've covered it on my podcast. And John, we're really going to get into the life and the crimes of this guy.
Right. You know, it's one that really has stayed in the spotlight for 30 years because of all the complications, and we'll get into it. But yes, this week, the yogurt shop murderer.
John, tonight we are talking about Robert Eugene Brashers, serial killer, rapist, mass murderer. Now we know the perpetrator in the infamous yogurt shop killings. He attempted murder, rape, arson. John, this guy runs the gamut with these crimes. But let's get into his early life. We always see a trend in this, right? His family life, how he was growing up. So what do we know about Eugene Brashers?
Yeah, and when we start profiling serial killers, we look at their young life and usually can get a lot of clues. But unfortunately, in this case, there's not a lot to go on. He was the younger of two surviving children. His family moved to Huntsville, Alabama during his childhood. And he was really described as a normal youth. You know, usually we see they're loners, they're ostracized. Maybe the family's impoverished. They don't have clean clothes or good clothes. Maybe they're abused or abused, sexually assaulted. This, we find no reported drug use, no reported alcohol issues. He actually graduated high school without any legal troubles. So, right now, as we start looking at his early life, he certainly doesn't fit the traditional profile of a serial killer. But as you just said, Brandy, he's not a traditional serial killer. He's an arsonist. He's a rapist. He's a robber. He's a murderer. I mean, he covers the entire criminal gamut, basically.
Yeah, and again, he goes to the military. So, Well, before we hop into that, I do want to say, John, there are a lot of serial killers we've talked about and ones we're going to talk about in the future that had very fine home lives when they were growing up. And so, like you always say with you being, solving the serial killer in Dallas, looking at these cases, profiling these cases, something happens, right? Something, the nurture and the nexus comes together,
right?
something goes wrong.
Yeah, there's always some type of nexus between nature and nurture. And in this case, certainly the nurture part of it looked okay. At
Hmm.
least for a significant portion of his life, his young adult life. So something must have been wired wrong. He did enlist in the Army, later served in the Navy several years. He was honorably discharged in 1982. Maybe some of his military experience influenced his use of firearms, which he did use in his crimes. He was married in the early 1990s. He was a father of three. And so, really, he appeared to have a fairly stable family life. So,
Hmm.
this is one of those unusual circumstances that when we look at their very young life and their young adult life, we don't see a lot of those common precursors that are normal with serial killers. This really had to be one of those miswirings by nature. And even looking at precipitating stressors, which happen with mass murderers. Serial killers evolve, right? We talk about
That's right.
that. Mass murderers is a precipitating stressor. Not We can't even identify that here with Robert Brescher. So his growing up, at least his early years, appeared to be very, very normal. It's once he left the military,
Hmm.
things started going sideways, and maybe he lost the structure that he needed, right?
Right.
Maybe as a young person, we see this all the time. How many of these guys join the military? I think they're looking for structure, they're looking for normalcy, and Brescher's life started falling apart, at least what we know about, after he got out of the military.
Well, and we also know just the effects of the military, right? And what can happen with some people who, maybe there's some brain injury, maybe there's some PTSD, maybe something happened that was traumatic and it shifts the brain chemistry. So, right now you're right. We don't see much, but I am curious what is going to continue to happen in the future. Because right now his facade is family man, married, children, graduated high school, joined the military, honorably discharged. And so, but things are going to change for this guy.
Yeah, after the military relocated down to New Orleans, and then started drifting around, working odd jobs, really not having a fixed job or a fixed income. Moved to Fort Myers, Florida in the mid 1980s, but no major crimes until 1985. Now, later on, witnesses and others, including his children, said, hey, it was during this time we started to notice what they called predatory behavior towards
Mm.
women. So maybe there was some precipitating stressor, some triggering event. Maybe it was something in his marriage, post military life. We don't know. But in retrospect, those in his family saw a change in him in the mid 1980s.
And the family, that is another thing also with some of these cases that the behavior changes, right? Like sometimes they commit crimes and then something happens and triggers that either before or after. But he becomes, I mean, John, his first victim is just a few years late, 1985. I mean, this is the time he's working odd jobs. This is the time his family is noticing a little bit of change in him.
Yep.
And this is when he has his first known crime, which is Michelle Wilkerson. So let's talk
Yeah.
about Michelle.
Yeah, this was basically for a first crime. This was pretty horrific. So, you and I always talk about this. It wasn't his first crime, or
Right.
was it the first one we know about? So he met Michelle Wilkerson, who was 24 at the time, down in Fort Pierce, Florida. at a bar. And they drank at the bar. And then he said, hey, I want to get another 6-pack and let's go to the citrus grove. And they sat there and they had more drinks in the citrus grove. Brashers wanted sex. Wilkerson fought back. Brashers had a gun with him. I get, right there, I'm starting to see, wait a minute. It's one thing. Okay, he's married. Maybe he's out having an affair. He's out drinking. He wants to have sex, but he's got a gun with him on him.
Okay.
So they get a fight, basically, because she doesn't want to have sex. He shoots her in the head and neck and thinks she's dead. So he leaves her and he just drives away. But he says, uh-oh, I just shot somebody. He thinks he killed her. So he drives to the beach to throw the gun in the ocean. Well, when he throws the gun in the ocean, he gets his car stuck in the beach, in the sand. So now he's walking. Well, what he doesn't know is he's tossing what he thinks is the murder weapon, is that she didn't die from the wounds, the shot to the head and the shot to the neck. She actually crawled away into the mangroves and then crawled out into a street where she found somebody and called the police. They immediately went searching, and they see him literally walking down the road not far away because his car is stuck because he tried going to the beach to throw the gun away.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
A great story of survival, though, Brandy. And
oh my gosh. We talk about that all the time, John. I mean,
when you're talking to young women, especially, when you're talking to anybody, you tell them to fight, right? You
That's
fight
right.
to live, you fight to survive, you keep going, you never give up. But, I kind of went into detail about this because I thought it was a great story of survival. She did not give up. With a gunshot wound to the head and one to the neck, and she kept fighting, through the incident.
Yeah. Well, and okay, so let's go back to the gun. He has a gun on him. So was the intention to use it? I don't know. Maybe,
Right.
maybe not. But you get rejected from sex, and your immediate reaction is to shoot someone in the head and neck. So to me, that's already, he's now off the radar, right? Off the normalcy radar, and he's taken and he's just going to go throw it in the ocean. John, this is the time to get the guy, right? He's on foot. Do they find him quickly?
Yeah,
with this?
no, they do find him and arrest him. But I want to go back to that point because you made a great point. Him having the gun with him. It's one thing to be rejected for sex, but then, like you said, to take it to the extreme of shooting her in the head, thinking that you murdered her, and that's not a big deal. And why did he have the gun in the first place? What was this? His third or fourth or fifth attempt at this? Did he learn he needed to bring a gun? Are there others that he killed and left in the swamp or left in the citrus grove? So those are a lot of questions. So, when you start looking, we kept saying his young life looked normal, his life even up to post-military looked normal. Maybe it wasn't.
I was just thinking that, John, like maybe
we
like you
just
said,
don't know about
yeah,
it.
you just don't know. I mean, it could have been sexual assaults, right? And maybe he brought the gun because the last time didn't go so well and he doesn't want to get caught. So maybe if he attempted this again and they fought back, well, maybe he had to make sure they were never, ever going to be able to talk. I mean, we don't know, but I do find it interesting that the brash action to take being rejected is to shoot someone twice in the neck and head.
Right.
So,
yep. I agree.
Yeah.
So the cops do find him. I mean, literally, his car's stuck in the sand on the beach. He can't go anywhere. He's not mobile. He's got to walk. She gives a description of exactly who she's been with the entire evening. He's arrested for first-degree murder, aggravated battery, and using a firearm. In a plea agreement, and I hate plea agreements, you know that.
Yep.
I hate how these attorneys let bad people back on the street just so they get credit for, I got a conviction. So here's a guy that shot a woman in the head and neck, left her for dead, and he says, okay, I'll plead guilty to the aggravated assault with a firearm, and let's forget about the first-degree murder and everything else, attempted murder and everything else. He gets sentenced to 12 years in prison But like we've seen so many times, he's released after only 4 years. And so in 1989, when he's released, we can really see that he's off the rails at this point, right?
Yeah.
He is really off the rails.
I cannot believe it is still a little mind boggling that they dropped the first degree murder when he shot her twice. That I just, it's very difficult for me to
Well, it's
understand.
harder to prove, right? It's harder to prove. Was he really trying to kill her? Was that his intention? And
I
so it's
see.
easier for the prosecutor to say, let's take a lesser charge of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon that he'll
Mhm.
plead to, and we'll give him less years. But again, instead of getting 20, 25, 30 years for an attempt murder, he's got 12 for an ag assault and gets out in 4.
Yeah.
And this is the start of or at least from here on out, his predatory behavior continues and continues and continues. He's released in 89, and his next murder is in 1990.
He's back on the streets doing it again, and this is the murder of Genevieve Citricki. So let's talk about Genevieve.
Yeah, she's white female, 28, from Greenville, South Carolina. So again, he's moving around. He had been in Alabama, went to Florida. Now he's in South Carolina. It's the first confirmed murder that we know of. She was raped. She was beaten and strangled with her own pantyhose. Her body was then submerged in a bathtub, and there was a taunting message written on the mirror that basically said, "You will die." He was telling his victim, "You will die." Um, he did break into the apartment and sexually assault her. She was found by her roommate, and the scene was staged to kind of delay discovery of it, discovery of the crime, which made it a little bit more difficult. But with the roommate coming in so much later, there were no witnesses, no evidence. It wasn't discovered till years later that he actually lived right down the street. And her murder, so she was killed in 1990. Her murder was not solved until 2006.
Wow. Well, John, we're going to see in a lot of, unfortunately, including Yogurt Shop and some of the other, I mean, this guy was really put on people's radar after DNA, which is just fantastic. And we're going to be talking about that later. But gosh, I think about all these victims before really anybody can identify who's responsible, but now they have answers, and just unbelievable some of the crimes he was doing. I mean, Yogurt Shop was bad enough, and I think people had images in their head of who could do something like this. But I think once we start talking about all these victims, people are really going to understand why this guy would have been capable to do what he did to those girls.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's just a laundry list of victims that we're going to see. From a profiling standpoint, we're starting to see a pattern, right?
Mhm.
Young white females, young 20s, so we know that he lived down the street from Zwicky, had probably been watching her, knew that she was home alone, knew that the roommate had left, obviously was familiar with the first victim. He drank with her in the bar, took her out to the citrus grove, but not a real pattern other than females, 20s and younger at this point. The crimes, although they seem kind of disorganized, the use of the pantyhose in the apartment would be a little disorganized. But bringing that weapon, to the first assault shows that he is organized. And if he was watching Zwicky, that means he was planning and there was preparation. And so that was an organized killing, especially if he planned it for when the roommate was going to be away, when he could be alone with her, when he had time to rape her, put her in the bathtub, write the message on the mirror, all of that stuff. So that's starting to emerge as a very organized pattern of behavior. He's bringing or finding weapons that suit his needs. And right now, we see the needs at this point are pretty much dominated by sex.
Yeah, and another thing is he seems to be taking his time with some of this. A little bit of over. So we have raping, bludgeoning, strangling, right? So is it the torture? Is it the overkill? Is it so he's
Staging of the
doing,
bodies.
yeah, staging of the bodies. I mean,
Yep.
which we saw in Yogurt Shop,
Yep.
So,
The
yep,
message on the mirror.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
The
So
message on the
this
mirror.
is almost, he is evolving. He is evolving, as many of these serial killers do. Um, Probably been a serial rapist for quite a long time. The same with his assaults, and now it's elevated to murder.
And in 1992, they had him again, John. Another arrest, but this time for grand theft auto and
Yep.
unlawful possession of a firearm.
Again, he's got a weapon again. We see him with a weapon numerous times, arrested for the theft and everything. But this is what I really found interesting is during the search of his apartment and his vehicle. So he's arrested. They're searching his vehicle, searching the apartment. They find a radio scanner, a police radio scanner, a police jacket, lock picking tools, and a fake driver's license. This was basically the initial makings of his kill kit. You know how serial killers have a kill kit? Well,
Mm-hmm.
he's obviously out there posing to some people as a law enforcement officer. So he's got the scanner turned up. Somebody can hear the police radio in the background. He's wearing a police jacket. He's got lock picking tools to break into an apartment, break into a house. So no telling what crimes he was committing at
Mm-hmm.
this time, homicides, rapes, when he's arrested for grand theft auto. And again, he's sentenced to just 5 years in prison.
Yeah, the radio scanner, John, the police jacket, it gave me chills reading about this because I just think of so many cases of women who are approached by people who are pretending they are law enforcement. And I just have to wonder how many times he did this and using that radio scanner and finding out, the activity with police activity and stuff in the area and being able to evade arrest. And
Yeah.
so quite chilling knowing what
And
we know now about the Yogurt Shop.
let's go to that warning that we do quite frequently for young women. If your sixth sense is telling you something's wrong, you are never going to get in trouble for driving to a police station or driving to a fire station. If you don't feel that that's a real officer, yeah, he's
Mhm.
got a scanner, he's got a police jacket, there is no prosecutor in the country that's going to charge you if you say, I didn't feel good about it. I didn't believe he was an officer. I didn't see badge or credentials or lights or whatever. Drive to a fire station, a hospital, a police station where people are. And if the guy's a real cop and he wants to try to do something, I guarantee you, there's not a prosecutor that's going to take any kind of evading arrest or anything else. If you just in a normal fashion drove to, like I said, a
Mhm.
hospital, a fire station, a police department and say, okay, here in the light where everybody can see, where there's witnesses and people to help me, I
Mhm.
feel comfortable. So I just thought we needed to bring that up,
Yeah.
as another warning to our listeners. I can't say it enough. I'd rather give you warning after warning, right? I tell
Mhm.
my daughter all the time to be safe, be safe, be safe. But I'd rather say that than be guilty of not saying anything and the worst happens, right?
Oh, John, we have true crime podcasts. We talk to our kids. You were a police officer investigator. You've lived the life. I tell my daughter, you don't ever get in the car. If you get in the car, we can't find, you just fight back, scream. But I'm so glad you mentioned that about being pulled over possibly by someone who you may or may not think is a police officer. John, I'm not sure everybody would feel comfortable telling that officer, can we drive up the street to the hospital or to, the police station, just so I'm comfortable interacting with you, just to make sure this is legitimate. I mean, I don't know if people feel comfortable, but you're saying it's okay just to go do that.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Okay.
If you're not sure that's an officer, right? And we've got so many different vehicles nowadays, and some of them have permanent light bars, and some have temporary light bars. There's all kinds of stuff. Cars that are marked and not marked, and whatever. Certainly, if I was a woman and my sixth sense kicked in and said, "I'm not feeling good about this," I would just drive to where I could find some type of sanctuary, and I wouldn't worry about like additional charges. I'm not telling you start a car chase. I'm
That's right.
saying I don't feel good. I'm not getting out. I'm not opening the door or the window. I'm going to drive somewhere and we'll talk around witnesses and in a space that I feel safe.
All
Just
right.
a warning to some of our listeners out there.
No, that's great. And so ladies, you can feel comfortable doing that. John, thank you for saying that. I think women need to hear that. Because I think there's a little bit of vulnerability and power, feeling a little powerless when you're in that situation. But thank you for sharing that. Okay, so we're now in 1998, and unfortunately, we have a mother, 38 years old, and a child, 12 years old, who become his next victims.
And he's in Missouri now. So we've tracked him from Alabama to Florida, South Carolina, up to Missouri now. This is a home invasion. Shouldn't surprise you, right? So where's he been the last 5 years? He's been in prison. Remember, he had the lock picking tools. He had the police jacket. So here's another home invasion. He ties both of them up. He shoots them execution style, but he rapes the 12-year-old before killing her. This crime, although it was committed in 1998, wasn't solved until 2018. And again, we're going to kind of get into the story and the DNA later, but this guy really wasn't tied to these crimes for years. The mom was in the living room, bound and shot in the head. So we see that MO again appearing. He started it in the citrus grove or even before, but he carries a firearm with him and shoots the victim in the head. The poor little girl, the 12-year-old, he rapes her and shoots her. And those bodies of the mom and the daughter were discovered by family members later on.
And so when I was looking at this case with the mother and the daughter, and you and I talked about this, the first thing that stuck out is he rapes the child, not the mother.
Yep.
Which, now that we know this guy's history and what we're going to talk about with Yogurt Shop, makes total sense that he was sexually attracted to young girls. That was probably, I would say, his preference, even if we don't know all the victims. There could have been molestation going on with other children in the neighborhood. He had kids of his own. We just don't know the whole background of this. But this is a pattern, John, we're going to start seeing in this, guys, is the vulnerability of these young girls.
Yeah, and we know robbery wasn't a motive. That's not why he's doing this. This was a personal attack. And Sherry, by the way, the mom, had survived a home invasion attempt just days earlier. And now they think it was Brazier who was trying to get in then, couldn't do it, even though we know he had lock-picking tools, right? But for whatever reason, didn't have the right tools on that day, didn't work. We do know that he bound his victims with cords. He shot them multiple times with a .38 caliber, and the ballistics, they learned later on, matched the gun to another assault the very same day in Tennessee. So, this is a guy that is intent on scoping out his victims, breaking into the homes, raping, and killing his victims.
And it doesn't stop there. Okay, 1998. And if we talk about the space between these crimes, right, usually. So these additional crimes, we have March of 1998. He suspected the rape of a 14-year-old in Memphis. April of 1998, burglary in Arkansas, and he's then released. Again in 98, attempted assault of a 25-year-old woman in Tennessee. And this was actually the same weapon he used against the Shearer family.
Yep.
And then the possible links to additional unsolved cases, South Carolina, Tennessee. This guy moved all over, John. I mean, he was comfortable state to state.
Yeah, he kept on the move, and I think that's how he stayed one step ahead of the law. He did have fake badges. He impersonated law enforcement. He had fake IDs. And I think this is how he got away with it, moving from state to state to state. But it's just absolutely amazing the number of crimes that this guy committed. And we haven't even started to delve into the largest crime yet, but here we see a constant pattern of breaking and entering into homes, of accosting women, of raping women, of shooting women in the head, and raping little girls. And now we're going to get into the largest crime of all. On each episode of True Crime and Wine, we feature one of our Casaro winery brands. And it's fitting to share with everybody what Brandy and I are enjoying today. It's a glass of our Dolcetto. It's a rich, round, red, dry red wine with soft flavors of black cherry and aromas of blackberry and plum. And let me tell you, this Dolcetto has an amazing fruit-forward aroma on it. It's light and it pairs well with pizza, pasta, sausage, and mushrooms. And of course, there's no better way to enjoy True Crime and Wine, your favorite podcast, than with a glass of Dolcetto from Casaro Winery. As with all of our wines, you can find it at casarowines.com. CASSARO wines.com. We'll ship it right to your house, and you can sip with Brandy and I as you enjoy True Crime and Wine. Salud.
All right, John. So we know that Brashers was responsible for the yogurt shop murders, and we're going to be talking that in a little bit, the most horrific crime of all. But let's talk about this final crime that happened on January 13th, 1999.
Right. So we've seen that laundry list that you and I just went over from 1998 and how mobile he was, state to state, sometimes murdering or breaking and entering on the very same day with the very same weapon. But on January 13th, 1999, police were doing what they usually do, running license plates in the parking lot of a motel. That's kind of one of those things that we do. We drive around, we go to different popular places like shopping malls, motels, and bars and restaurants, and run license plates looking for stolen cars or felony warrants associated with stolen cars. Officers hit on this car in Kennett, Missouri, and traced it back to Brasher's room. Went into the manager and said, "Hey, do you know who's driving that vehicle there?" "Oh, yeah, it's the guy in number 8, right?" And they said, "All right, we're going to go get him. We know this is a stolen car." They kick down the door. They attempt to arrest him, but he hides under the bed and with his weapon shoots at officers. Well, they're forced to retreat outside. So now you've got Brashers in the hotel room. By the way, he's with his wife and daughters in the hotel room. Cops now had to back out. They just got shot at. They thought they were just going after a guy that stole the car. Well, now they got shot at. They get out of the room. They're okay. They call for help. Now we have a standoff. So this standoff goes on for over 4 hours with Brashers holding his wife and own daughters hostage. finally, the police negotiate their release. So after about
Okay.
4 hours, Brasher finally lets his wife and daughters go. But as soon as they're cleared out of the room, he shoots himself in the head. He doesn't die immediately, but he does die several days later from self-inflicted gunshot wounds.
So, okay. So my thought is he now is very well aware that he's done these crimes. He knows he's caught on some level, may not know why, but they've got him cornered. He's got his family. Thankfully, they are released and safe. And then he takes his life because I think he knows what's about to go down, right? So he is
Because
yeah,
he knows about these crimes, Brandy.
that's right.
But remember, everything that we've been talking about,
Yeah,
nobody else does.
I know. That's
He
what's so
hasn't been,
crazy,
the
right?
only crimes he's been tied to is that auto theft that he went to jail for
Yeah.
5 years for, and the ag assault that he went to jail for 4 years for. So those other crimes that we've discussed,
I know.
he knows he did, right? But
Mm-hmm.
law enforcement doesn't know at that point. And that's kind of what's fascinating. You know, we tease that we only do interesting and intriguing serial killers on this show. Well, what's interesting is we're just over halfway through the show, and our bad guy is dead. But we're
Yes.
not ending the show.
Yes.
We're only halfway through it, and the bad guy's already dead. He's already killed himself in the motel room. So the show ought to end, but it really doesn't. There's some investigative breakthroughs that we need to talk about.
Yeah, and I find it so fascinating with this because I wonder if he actually knew why they were there, what if it had to do with the stolen vehicle, if he thought they were there to get him for his crimes that he had not been caught for yet, and then takes his life because he doesn't want to be held responsible for those crimes. So you're
Oh, he doesn't want to go
right.
back
We
to
haven't even
jail?
got to his worst crime. I mean, all of these are
Yeah,
terrible. Don't get me
yeah.
wrong. But I mean, this is, having an unsolved infamous case like Yogurt Shop for 30 years. And this guy dies. And now we're hearing about him in 2024, 2025, right? With this information coming out. So the arrest, John, and the legal history of this, like you said, 12 years behind bars, 5 years behind bars, the attempted break-in. I mean, this is what they only know, right? This is what they know, but they don't know anything else.
Yeah, and in my experience, Brandy, when I've interviewed arrestees before, guys that have committed many crimes, and I'll say, hey, we were coming in, we're running a warrant for X, and I cannot tell you, time after time, they have this astonished look on their face because they're paranoid.
Yep.
They know about all the other crimes. You don't. You may only be linking him to a lousy car theft, right?
That's right.
Not a big in the grand scheme of things, not a very big crime. But they're not thinking about an auto theft. They're thinking about who they've murdered, who they've raped, who they've tortured. They may be thinking about, I would be a 3-time loser. I'm not going back again. I'll never get out if I go back in. So you don't know what's going through their mind, but I can tell you they're very paranoid.
Yes. And I think that makes, I mean, he that was a very instant decision, right? Rash decision. And you're right. He wasn't going to go back down. He wasn't going to go back to prison. I do believe that he thought they had caught him. So very
Yep.
interesting. But John, you mentioned investigative breakthroughs. So let's talk about those.
Yeah, so he's dead. 1999, he's dead,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
But in 2006, they link his DNA to Zatricki's murder. So now this guy that they were going after for an auto theft and has had charges, he had it wasn't attempted murder, remember he just pled to aggravated assault with a weapon, and then the other one was auto theft. But now they're starting to link him through DNA to homicides and to rapes. So in 2006, they link him to Zadricki's murder. Then in 2018, they link him to the Schurer murders, the mother and daughter that he killed and then raped the daughter and killed her. And they link those through genetic genealogy. And then probably the largest as far as publicity, right? All of
Right.
these crimes are horrific. In 2025, Parabon Nano Labs is working on genetics and DNA, and they link him to the yogurt shop murders, which is just absolutely huge. And let me tell you just a little bit about Parabon. So CC Moore, a lab person at Parabon Nano Labs, identified Brashers as a suspect in 3 murders. So she knew about 3 murders and some rapes and was working on investigative genealogy, and she tied him to the murders. Well, prosecutors then file a motion to exhume his remains, right? They want to go dig him up now and test his DNA because the genealogy only takes you so far. They dig him up, they take the DNA from his remains, and they're an exact match to Zitricki's murder, right? And then they start looking into it more and discover, oh my gosh, we never even knew this. He literally lived right down the street from her at the time of the murder. So now it's all coming together. He was casing the joint, he was watching her, he had the lockpick tools and all of that. They also use the DNA and match him to the double murder of Sherry and Megan Shearer. They also match him to the rape of a 14-year-old in Memphis, Tennessee, and to another rape and murder in Kentucky. This guy, who authorities really thought was okay, he's a bad guy, right? You know, assault with a deadly weapon, grand theft auto, car theft. Those aren't even the same ballpark, Brandy,
No.
as murder, as rape, right? They're not even the same ballpark. And now, because of this great young lab worker at Parabon Nano Labs, they've linked him to multiple murders and rapes in multiple states.
I mean, I can't say enough about what genetic genealogy is doing to solve these cases. I mean, 30, 40, 50 years, Jane Doe's, John, who
Yep.
people have never been able to identify. I mean, just so much happening behind the scenes, and they're busy. I mean, think about the number of unsolved cases in this country. I mean, think about how much this can be used to solve, like this one. I mean, 30 years in Austin of this case in Texas that people couldn't shake, books written about it. You know, these girls were teenage girls working in a yogurt shop. They aren't walking the streets. They aren't ladies of the night. These are teenage girls just having a job at a yogurt shop, John.
If you're a true crime lover and collect true crime t-shirts, wine glasses, stickers, hoodies, earrings, or other fashionable items, make sure you check out our True Crime and Wine logo apparel and more at shoptruecrime.com or at the Casaro Winery website, casarowines.com. So check out our True Crime and Wine selection of all kinds of collectibles and enjoy them as you listen to our podcast of True Crime and Wine.
Okay, so now let's get into the yogurt shop.
Yeah, 'cause let's kinda
1991. Yep.
recap that for people, Brandy, if they
Sure.
don't know. Like you said, here in Texas, we've literally heard about this for 3 decades.
Yep. All right. So 1991 in the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt shop. I'm sure everyone has heard of I Can't Believe It's Yogurt. So you have 14 teenage girls that are killed in a robbery turned mass murder. Um, there are definitely pieces of this, John, that happened inside the scene. What we know about the door being locked from, nobody could actually enter the front door. So I think they were trying to put some of these pieces together. But this case involved rape, execution style shootings. They were binded, arson. The military thing, John, every time I looked at this case, with the folded clothes and the shoes pushed against the wall, I always thought this is someone that was in the military who had them nicely fold their clothes and put their shoes where they're supposed to be. But these girls are found stacked in the back room. I mean, horrific. And not only that, then we have arson involved. He tries to burn the place down to hide the evidence. Unfortunately, when this is called in, it's called in as a fire. So fire
Right.
department shows up, starts spraying water everywhere. That's killing some of the evidence that's left behind. But they had no idea what they were dealing with when they put that fire out and saw these 4 girls lying there.
Right. And the firemen not knowing, in the initial stages of it, we're trying to save the building. It was in a strip shopping center. They
Mm-hmm.
were trying to save the shopping center. And so not only did you have the fire system in the building, you had firemen spraying water everywhere trying to put the fire out. So you had the fire that destroyed a lot of evidence. You had the water that destroyed even more evidence, but multiple gunshot wounds to the head for these girls. And what is this guy's pattern? What have we seen in all these murders that we just uncovered? Gunshot wound to the head, going back years to that very first victim that he shot in the head and neck. That was his MO. I'm going to have a gun. I'm going to shoot him in the head. I'm going to sexually assault him, which he did to at least 2 of the girls, and then set it ablaze to try to get away from it. They did find 1 bullet casing in the drain. They did hang on to that, and that's going to come into play over 30 years later.
I mean, I remember like thinking it. Well, first of all, I don't know if really anyone in the public knew about the bullet casing. I've never heard about the bullet casing. I started to hear about it once they started linking him. But gosh, to keep that bullet and then linking that bullet to the one that he shot himself in the head with, right? Like to be able to then put that together, unbelievable after 30 years. I mean, that's just great police work, really, with that. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
go ahead and maybe tell us about the victims here, because I think we need
Yeah.
to kind of remember that. It
Yes.
was just, I mean, every crime is horrible, every murder is horrific. As a cop, you remember them all, but when you come into a scene like this, and I can tell you, it has happened to me on more than one occasion. I actually went into a mass murder on one occasion, went into another mass shooting on another occasion, and just seeing the carnage, it's something that never leaves you.
Yeah. So we have Amy Ayers, 13 years old. She was actually the youngest victim, John, shot in the head, and she was partially clothed when she was found. Eliza Thomas was 17. She was just a coworker, a friend, bound and shot execution style. Jennifer Harbison was also 17. She was actually the manager at the yogurt shop. She was raped, shot. Her body had been burned. Sarah Harbison, 15. John, that's her sister, right? Jennifer Harbison's sister. She was just visiting the yogurt shop. Her sister was working there. She's found bound and shot. All the victims knew each other. They were last seen closing the shop around 11. There were
Yep.
Witnesses that said they saw someone sitting in the booth, and that the rule around the yogurt shop was once it was closed, you lock the door, whether there's still people inside or not, and then you will let them out the front door when they're ready to leave. So we know that the door got locked somehow from the inside. So, I don't know, John, will we ever really know if Brashers was in there? Would we ever know if he was dressed as a police officer and came to the door and unlocked it and then locked it behind? I mean, so many things run through my mind now because there's a lot about this crime that we don't know. you know?
We do know he had lock-picking equipment. We do know that he
Yep.
impersonated a cop. We did know that he had a police jacket and fake IDs. So any of those scenarios are possible. But this case, just takes a horrific turn in that several local teens were then convicted for these murders.
I
You
know.
can imagine the uproar in Austin for 4 little girls being killed. Everybody wants the murderers. Well, unfortunately, at least two of the young men, there
Mhm.
was no physical evidence, no fingerprints, no DNA, no gun match, and what we believe were coerced confessions. And
Mhm.
they were wrongfully convicted and not exonerated until 2009 and 2010. So these girls are murdered. The wrong people are sent to prison,
Mhm.
finally get out of prison, but we still don't have the murderer, right? The
Right.
case is cold for decades. And it was over 34 years, thousands of leads before an HBO documentary that was released in 2025, I think August of this year, if I
Mhm.
remember, renewed the interest of Austin police. Now, they had the case assigned to the cold case unit for a long time. They had
Yeah.
been perusing evidence, keeping evidence, deciding what evidence to submit. And as we know, we can do things today we couldn't do 2 years ago. We could do things 2 years ago that we couldn't do 10 years ago. I mean, to me, it's hard for me to fathom that the serial killer I captured, we didn't even have the internet. The internet
Yeah.
was not going to be around for 7 years after that case. So, advances in technology and genealogy and DNA and genetic testing, people, it's we are in such a position right now where we can clear so many cases that we never could before. And credit where credit is due, Detective Jackson of the Austin Police Department submitted that bullet casing to a national database and got a hit on a murder in Kentucky. He then
Good.
submitted DNA and got a hit on a murder in South Carolina. Well, that's what led him to Brasher's because Brasher's was the one tied to the murder in South Carolina. They did some additional testing, and a month after the series came out, Austin police said because of the ballistic match and because of the DNA match, we can now say that Robert Eugene Brashers was the one that murdered these girls in the Austin yogurt shop 34 years before.
I mean, just unbelievable police work, John. I hate that the wrongful convictions happened. Those men were put through a lot. And it, like you said, the community is in uproar. The police want these perpetrators, because at the time you have four victims.
Right.
I think as much research that I had done in that case, we had always thought it was two people. How is one person going to be able to overtake four girls? And so you always had this, is there one person? Is there two people? So I think when the people saw this come out and that Brasher's was responsible, I think maybe one of the questions was, well, was he alone? Did he do this alone?
But if he was in uniform, Brandy, again, we talked about it earlier in the
So true.
show, right? These are young girls. They're taught to respect the police, do what the police say. He could have caught them
True.
totally off guard. And he's armed, and they're
That's right.
not.
Wow. All right. Well, now that you mentioned the DNA match, so the family DNA is what they got the match to Brasher's. I mean, again, the genealogy, it's just fantastic when they can trace the family trees. And really, they can go uncles, brothers. I mean, they don't necessarily know when they're running all of this testing. They may not have exactly their perpetrator, but they will have some of the family DNA, some of that with
Yeah, and they
some of
get it
that.
close enough that we can narrow it down, and all of a sudden, you're not looking at this pool of 400 million people in the U.S. You're
That's
looking
right.
at a very specific set of people. And when they discovered that Brashers was living in Texas, in the area at the time, and they went back and recreated his travel patterns, they've got him living in Texas, in the area. They've got his DNA, and they've got the casing from the gun. So we know that
Mhm.
he was responsible for those murders. It did, that 1999 suicide ended his reign of terror, but it really didn't bring justice for the victims. And it left a lot of these cases unsolved until now.
Yeah.
And thankfully it does close the case. But my question is, as we wrap up here, is how many more
Mm,
murders, rapes, arsons, robberies are there
I
that
know.
we just simply haven't matched yet? That a laboratory has not looked at DNA? How many samples are sitting in evidence rooms, in lockers? And because maybe staffing, maybe they don't have a cold case unit, maybe there's no one to work on the leads, they haven't matched that DNA. I mean, his victim count could be exponentially higher. And we've talked about this before. Um, I love the women, the moms, the dads, the daughters, the sisters, the kids, the family members that never give up, right?
I know. I
That
know.
always want to know what is the answer. And I love when they stay on law enforcement, they keep the story in the news, they keep, working with the detectives, they keep asking and asking and asking for answers. And it works sometimes. And with
Absolutely.
someone like this, who knows what his body count can be?
I'm not convinced that the first crime where he has a gun, shoots the woman in the head and the neck was his actual first crime.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that wasn't even a practice crime, as we see some of these guys have practice crimes. I think he knew to bring the gun. He knew if things went sideways, he knew what he was going to do. I don't think it was a reaction. And I think his pattern of seeking out women and young girls in vulnerable positions in their home, in their work, him stalking them, him breaking in, raping and murdering them, that was his pattern throughout his entire life. And so now we know not only did Robert Brashers commit the yogurt shop murders in Austin, but thankfully we're discovering all of these other crimes that he committed, solving them and giving closure to the families. As we put a cork in this edition of True Crime and Wine, I want to remind our listeners they can follow us on our socials at JJ True Crime and Wine. You can sign up for our True Crime and Wine Club. And as always, purchase our award winning wines at CasaroWines.com so that you can sip a great glass of wine with Brandy and I as we profile the killers in each and every show. And I think that wraps up our business for today. I want to thank, of course, my co-host, Brandy Diamond. Great job again today. Thank you for joining us on this journey. And our producer, Lauren Bedso. Fantastic. Back in the Corsicana Command Center. Everything you do for making this show possible. And we're going to see you next week on the next episode. We're going to travel back overseas. Yeah, we don't just stick to the U.S., we feature killers from around the world, and we're going to present the chessboard killer, a serial killer whose goal was to fill each of the 64 squares on his chessboard with a different victim. I'm John Matthews, and thanks for joining us for this edition of True Crime and Wine. Salud.